Awesome. Well, I think we can get started. It's great to see everyone. Good morning from here in Vietnam, or good evening, or I think for Caitlin, it's like good 2 a.m. So I don't know what you say for that in Madrid, but good. It's great to see everyone. Really excited for us to kick off this real world event for recent grads, which is about a topic I think really close to all of our hearts, making the move abroad. Um, Maybe just a quick introduction of myself. So I'm Steven. I am based in Ho Chi Minh City. I actually moved here right after college for a couple months to learn Vietnamese. Moved back to the US, was in China actually with Jen at the same time, and then made the move back to Vietnam and am a Vietnam lifer. So if anyone wants to talk about moving to Vietnam, that's my main intention for being part of this. But I'm also part of the Harvard Club of Vietnam and the vice president, and I'm also a member of the executive committee for the Harvard Alumni Association and one of the chairs for the fifth reunion program committee. So doing a lot, really excited to be here with some great people. So just some context, I'm gonna be playing the host. I don't have too much to say, but this is the 10th Real World to Recent Grads event and the first one of this year. This is kind of based on the spring series we've had around senior week. So part for the final 6 months of senior year, where we're connecting people who are, alums, seniors who are thinking about just real problems about life post college. So today we're going to be talking about something which I think is great, which is getting the heck out of the US, making the move abroad. This is really many of you guys are back. We have Andrew and Jed who are back. So glad to have you guys back in the States. This is really meant to be a conversation between peers. Like we're all, roughly the same age. Always like the oldest guy says that. But so anyways, but we're all, we're all peers. And so we're not gonna be too much talking, but really just want to hear from you guys. Actually, I'd love if in the chat if you could just throw in where you currently are. I'm just kind of curious to hear, see where people are. I think if you have access to the chat, I don't know if you do or don't, but if not, no worries. But I'm just curious if you can throw it in. Nice, Madrid, San Francisco. I'm in. Great. Cool. Okay, we got some people all over. Uh, Perfect. So before we just get started, I want to share a little bit about the Harvard Alumni Association, which is just an amazing organization that of course, John Prince, thank you so much for all of your work putting this together. It's the official organization of both the university, the Harvard Alumni Association, and for Harvard College in particular. And the goal of the HA is being a engaged, thriving community. I really think of it just as a organization that's focused on helping build those connections that we already have between each other, and to do that in a structured way. The college alumni programs is focused on particularly college alums of both Harvard and Radcliffe colleges. And the recent graduate engagement committee is an awesome committee focused on people in the past who have recently graduated, who are committed, excited about uh, post college life and want to keep that Harvard connection between classmates and with the university itself. So, uh, with that, I don't want to say too much more, but I want to pass the floor to my classmate Andrew, class of 17. We speak a bit about moving to South Africa, starting a tech company, and then later moving back to the US. So Andrew, I'll pass to you.
Cool. Thanks, Stephen. And nice to be sharing the floor with you and everyone here. It's obviously a great opportunity for me to talk about um, what I see as honestly one of the best moves that I made in my life, to spend some time abroad. And I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up there. But I think for me, right, like I had already traveled quite extensively in college. I'd actually briefly dropped out of school, which is not something I advise, but I did that to work in the Middle East. And I think I always had in me like this desire to go back again. And that was exacerbated by the fact that I left for DC. I see some of you in the chat are actually living there now. And I love DC as a city, but for some reason it didn't really do too much to me. I think it just increased the itch I had being such an international place, to travel somewhere else. So I like to say to people who I don't know very well that the reason why I ended up going abroad was because I saw this like big opportunity for a tech company there. But the honest answer was that while I was in DC, I got dumped pretty hard. And I feel like you have to use the motivation, like the hate fire that exists in your soul after you get after you're dumped to do something big and drastic with your life. And for me, that was to move to a whole other continent. It was initially I took a sort of a sabbatical to I was working at Bain at the time, so I took a sabbatical to work in Zambia. Cried on a friend's shoulder, and she was like, "You should just come live in South Africa with me." And so it was a convenient way to exit the country, and I kind of never looked back. Like for the first couple of years in South Africa, I was working for a tech company, so I wasn't actually there to start my startup at the time. Um, and it was during that time that COVID actually hit. And I remember like having a brief window of maybe 2 to 3 weeks to decide on whether I wanted to stay or whether I wanted to go back to the US. And I think against all odds, like I saw a lot of my friends and a lot of other people who were living in Kenya at the time or other places in Africa just moved back to the US kind of in droves. And I decided to stick it out. And for me, that was kind of big. I mean, as many of you are probably in the same mindset of doing, I'm like a professional drifter. I love to go from thing to thing and to spend like 1 to 2 years max in any one place. But this is like the first time that I actually committed to staying in a place. So I ended up living there for 5 years. And in order to do so, it's actually really, really hard to live in South Africa for more than just like a tourist visa's amount of time. You either have to like get married to someone or you have to start a company. And I figured out that like getting married was probably not in the cards for me at the time. So I ended up starting a tech company of my own and running it with my co-founders there. And I would have loved to continue doing it for a very long time, were it not for the fact that my dad got a little sick here in the States, and I had been away from him and my family for some time. And I think that is actually probably the biggest challenge that some of the rest of my colleagues will speak to here is just like how to maintain an active connection to the people who raise you and to your friends and to your community when you live abroad, which I'm sure many of you might have questions on. But that for me was the thing that, eventually convinced me to move back. And, here I am back in San Francisco and loving it. So I think like a couple things that you can take away from my experience, right? Like one, like moving abroad doesn't have to be this big thing, right? That you then define the rest of your life by. Like, you're very early on and having just recently graduated, you can make the move, such as living somewhere else. And then secondly, before I show some fun pictures, is that I feel like you don't really get a perspective of what it means to live like an American until you live somewhere where you're not amongst other Americans. Like so many times, I think going to college with other like primarily Americans, obviously they're internationals in school. You don't get a sense of what it really feels like to be in and to live in this country. And yeah, I definitely got a sense of the differences that other people have and the values that they have when you spend some time outside of the country. And I can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A, but given that we've been all allocated 5 minutes, I'll stop there and turn it over to John to show some fun pictures. So this was my casual apartment view that I had living in Cape Town of Table Mountain. And so you can see why easily it was very, very simple for me to stay. And I think critically for me, I lived with people who were local to the place. I think that was very important. And so during lockdown, when we didn't have cake and have the ability to go outside, I think we ordered in fast food and celebrated my birthday on a plate of fries. You can flip to the next slide, John. But this is us like hiking and just celebrating, just, yeah, being ourselves. Flip to the next one. Friends came and visited. So these are some of my friends from college. And my family actually came as well. So I think living abroad is also a great way to like bring people to you and to just get a second home in the world that you can bring people to. Next slide, John. Yeah, I mean, there's just like an entire photo album's worth of gratuitously beautiful photos that I have of the place. So I won't bore you all, but I just briefly flipping through the rest of these. It's just like an insanely beautiful country. And for anyone who's even remotely interested in going to South Africa or traveling there, this is actually a photo of Namibia, of the second largest canyon in the world, Fish River Canyon. And I think being in Africa, you have the opportunity to travel amongst like a ton of different, I mean, 54 countries, right, that exist there. So a really great opportunity when you do move abroad to then like, fractalize your experience and like have a bunch of different experiences in a bunch of different countries. So that's a lot from me, but hopefully you got a sense and a flavor of my time abroad, and I'm happy to answer any other questions afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, I totally feel you about people coming to visit you. I find, by the way, I don't know if you've felt this, Andrew, is that like where you live dictates a lot of if they visit. Like I used to live in Beijing. No one visited me for some reason. No one wanted it. But I moved to Ho Chi Minh City. Everyone's like, let's go. And so the college friends pile in. So there is a strategy, I think, there if you want people to come visit. That's awesome. And I think there's a lot more for us to explore in the Q&A about your experience and also I think coming back. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah,
Before then, though, I
definitely.
wanted to pass. Yeah, awesome. I want to pass to my Quincy House friend, Jen. Jen, I was just remembering that we had this like really funny overlap. We were both living in China, and then at one point, I don't remember exactly how this happened, but we somehow shared like an iCloud account or something, or an Apple Photos account. And I just have this
Um,
vague memory of seeing your
yes.
photos in my phone for like 5 months. So, but you've lived abroad like everywhere, Beijing, Hong Kong, Singapore, you're an SF, like. I was just, I mean, you've done so much, and so I'd love to, pass to you, but
No,
that did
it's
happen, right? That's not a fever dream.
yes,
It's
yes,
like,
that actually happened. It's so cool to be able to like see you, Stephen, and meet everyone here. Yeah, so Stephen, you're right. That time was because my phone got stolen while I was traveling in Spain, actually. And then I got back to Beijing, and Stephen was so kind to like lend his phone, his extra some phone, that iPhone to me, and it's somehow connected to your iCloud. So like you were seeing my photos, which is
it's
awesome.
so funny. I remember just all these like food photos. I was like, this is delicious. Kind of jealous.
But yeah, so it's funny. Yeah. Yes, nice to meet everyone. Excited that there's a lot of interest among current undergrads to try being overseas. For my back or my story, I kind of in college I studied Chinese and did like HBA for I don't know if anyone on the call did that, but I think I really enjoyed my time that summer. My junior spring, I also did a study abroad program where I traveled to India, South Africa, and Brazil. It's through one of the IHP like global health series, so it depends on the theme. Depending on the theme, you might go to different continents. And I think those experiences really kind of gave me this bug that like itching, like where I really wanted to get out of the US and try something different again. My first job right after college actually was right in Harvard Square. So still had a great time then, but I think overall, I think having been overseas, I knew there was something missing. And I think what I really missed was having that international experience where you're just like meeting people from all over the world who have very different perspectives. Um, so I ended up applying to Yenching Academy, which is one of the two main master's programs in Beijing that attracts a lot of international students, and it still does, I think. And China at the time was, in a better kind of had global better relationships with the US, I would say. So the trade war only started while I was in my second year in Beijing. Anyways, so the context was I just coming into Beijing at the time, you just meet so many different people from all over the world. Um, yeah, I think a lot of curiosity around how China works from the inside and being at one of the best universities in China, learning about China from that angle was quite different than what we would normally get from the American perspective. I also realized being there that there is indeed many parts of the world where America is not the center of the universe, and I think that was kind of refreshing to experience. Um, yeah, and then another aspect was me being ABC, like Chinese American, kind of exploring my identity as a Chinese American, meeting a lot of people who are Asian American or I don't know, sort of different on different sides of the spectrum where you feel close but also very distant and different than people around you, even if you look similar. So there's a lot of like that type of exploration that I had in my master's program. I ended up deciding to stay in Asia after that program ended, partially because I was very curious to see what the work life would be like in Asia. And the other part is I met my partner who's from Singapore. So there's kind of two reasons. So I ended up working in Hong Kong, as Stephen mentioned. And then after Beijing, Hong Kong, went to Singapore. So experienced those countries living and working there and also during COVID. So there's a lot of challenges with that. Definitely quite isolating at a time during the COVID lockdown in Singapore where people really follow rules and get fined if they don't follow rules. So that was tough, but overall, yeah, I think still appreciate having that kind of global perspective or just different perspectives on life and seeing how different governments and countries operate very differently than the US. So I think that's also a different perspective that I was able to experience. But yeah, I would be happy to kind of follow up with any questions after that, after um, all the presentations. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, thank you, Jen. I'm sure we'll have some, and if not, I have some questions for you, for sure. Cool. Well, thank you, Jen. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember when you were bouncing around Hong Kong and then Singapore. I was like, man, I was like, oh, where's Waldo with you? I was like, where's Jen? That's cool. Okay, well, I'm excited to pass to my Kim Witten, who's going to speak a bit about moving to Paris, teach English and music elementary school, running a tutoring business, and performing as a musician. You seem
Oh
way
my God,
more
you said so many
talented.
things.
I know. I was like, oh my God,
I'll
way
try to
too
talk about it
talented.
briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear a bit about your experience. And you're in Paris right now, is
At
that
this
right?
exact
Whereabouts are
moment, I'm
you?
actually at home, which is in Cambridge, but yeah, I will be going
Okay.
back soon. Yeah. So
Okay.
you can share the
Cool.
slides and I'll give some hello, everyone. Uh, I think I have some slides so you can enjoy the pictures while I talk, but I'll try to make it brief. So basically, the main thing you should know about me is I'm actually from Cambridge. So I grew up in Cambridge, Mass, and that inspired me a lot in that I feel very dedicated to like my community. I want to do something good for my neighbors and my local community, but also I knew that after Harvard, I needed to leave in order to learn more and then decide if I really, really want to come back. So with that in mind, I decided that thought Paris would be really great. I knew I needed to learn French because for Vietnamese studies, I'm Vietnamese. Unfortunately, because of colonialism, like we are expected to learn French as well. And like I'm also a musician, so I play the flute and I sing, and obviously the music scene in Paris is amazing. And yeah, just like all of these things put together, I even did some research for my thesis interviewing Vietnamese language teachers in France. So all these things came together, and I knew that I needed some way to fund it. So I had already been tutoring, but I applied to do something called teaching assistant program in France. It's kind of like Fulbright, but it's just directly with the government, so there's more spots. And then I was got it, so it was totally perfect. I was teaching English and music in two elementary schools. You can see the top photo is me with all my colleagues. And the one of the photos beneath of the whiteboard is a project that my students did on Lunar New Year. And so that was just, I say, most fulfilling and also most challenging time of my life so far, teaching. But that really kind of cemented for me that I love teaching. And at the same time, I lived in a sort of like foyer slash boarding house for young women. And that was an amazing community. You can see us eating in the garden down there. And I was just doing everything all at once, teaching, learning French. You can see more of my students in the middle. I would teach at a local community school in the Vietnamese community. And I was also performing. So I joined a Vietnamese music collective and I met a really wonderful flute teacher who was teaching me specifically like traditional music. So this is all like 2024, 2025. We can go to the next slide. Or the next, whatever the next one is. Yeah, so now this is my second year. Um, I'm no longer teaching at the schools, but I still tutor, and I'm actually doing a master's program in linguistics and teaching. And yeah, it's a lot of the same, but just a lot more, I feel rooted. I have more community. Um, you can see me, I'm still performing a lot and also staying civically engaged, like helping people register to vote from abroad. And I get to do my research project actually at a school in Boston, which has a bilingual program. So I guess I don't, what I want to say is that there are ways to go abroad and also keep strong ties to your home and do good things in both places. And also, I think of it not just to go somewhere else, but to learn to be able to bring something back and to make where I live a better place. So that's kind of how I feel. I'm happy to answer any questions. Um, yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you. And so you're doing, wait, so you're doing your master's program right now
Yes,
and you're visiting back. Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Wow.
hmm
Wow. And do you think, I'm just curious, and then of course I'll pass the Kayla afterwards, but do you think you'll stay in Paris? Are you planning to come back and do a
Well,
PhD?
I'm
Like, how
planning to come
are you
back
seriously
because
thinking
I
about
really
it?
want to like get
Okay.
my license and things like that. But after that, I
Mm,
mean, you never really know. I definitely feel that no matter what, I will always have really strong connections there, like both friends, but also like professional. And I can imagine going back and forth or, just always trying to create more connections and like build better things.
got it.
Yeah,
Awesome. 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 Um, I've heard there's some great Vietnamese groups also in Vietnam. So you could
for
always
sure. I
consider.
should, I
And
should,
we're just kidding.
I'll
Just
see you
kidding.
next time.
Just kidding. Just guilt tripping. That's awesome. Well, we're gonna pass to our other Miss Europe, Caitlin, who's gonna talk a bit about her experience currently living on in Spain with a digital nomad visa, speaking 6 languages I learned, and it seems like she's crushing it. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about your experience and yeah, you can share a little bit with us about your journey.
Amazing. I'd love to have the slides pulled up. Amazing. Feel free to go to the next slide. Okay, so just some background on me. I'm currently Chief of Staff, Head of Growth of a Y Combinator addiction startup, and previously a Director of a mental and brain health VC fund. Very important to note, these companies are US companies that are fully remote that have allowed me to live my life abroad, but still stay connected with the US. Feel free to go to the next slide. So, similar to some of the speakers here, I was really fascinated with traveling in college. And even when I graduated and I had a job lined up in New York, I decided to, I graduated, go back to school to learn some beginner Spanish, and be a student right before and lived abroad in Valparaiso, Chile. I saw this entire life abroad and I was very curious about what it would look like if I moved away from the US. But then I moved, of course, to New York City to start my full-time job. Next slide. So I quickly realized the first job, like many people out of college, was not the right fit for me. It was a traditional office job in New York City, in traditional finance. I realized it was not what I really wanted to be in. I was really curious about the startup industry and actually took a leap by living in Tulum, Mexico for 1 month with a bunch of startup founders in this shared home by the beach. And it was an absolutely amazing experience to remote work. It gave me a taste of what remote work and that flexibility could look like. Next slide. So I ended up quitting my startup job. I was a startup founder. I quit my finance jobs, became a startup founder, and used that flexibility to actually road trip and live through all 50 states of America. I slept in my SUV and then lived in different states, remote worked in different cafes, met a lot of different people along the way. I have some examples here, like in Charleston, South Carolina, in Hawaii, in Delaware, and I got to see a lot of the US because of the remote flexibility. Next slide. So, a lot of what I did when I was a digital nomad was meeting a lot of different people and doing something called co-living. So, I would live in these shared spaces where there were multiple rooms, and I would meet people outside of my traditional networks, people from different backgrounds, people from different countries, different work, and lived across everywhere from New York to Puerto Rico to different cities in Morocco. I was moving around a lot. Sometimes it would be a month at a time, sometimes it'd be a week at a time. And I actually started to crave longer term community because I kept on meeting, like, I met hundreds of, if not thousands of people, and I was able to see a lot of the world, but I was craving kind of that stability and that grounding. Next slide. So I ended up falling in love with Madrid. Madrid was supposed to just be a 1 week stay. I was supposed to go to the next city. I was planning to live in London for another month, but ended up falling in love with Madrid. I ended up meeting my boyfriend in the middle of the week. It was a Wednesday. I was in quite a touristy space, wanted a photo with a statue, asked the first person that passed by, and he ended up taking a photo of me, and we ended up meeting. And he's a huge reason why I ended up moving to Madrid, and it was quite serendipity. And I think that's one aspect of moving abroad. You know, when you travel to different places, there's places where you end up wanting to visit, and there's places where it feels like it's a calling to you to do longer term life out there. And I was able to stay in Madrid for that 3 month limitation with your US passport. Ended up getting a new job that took me back to the US, but it was a remote job. I had to be based in America, but kept in touch with my life in Madrid and moved back to the US. Next slide. And so when I started that remote job, I would periodically work 2 weeks at a time, 1 month at a time. I think it's very important to know a lot of US companies that are remote often require certain hours. It's very unusual to have certain hours in Asia or Europe, but there are definitely companies that make that accept. So I would slowly remote work and started to experience that life in Spain. Next slide. So after 1.5 years, I gained the trust of the founders of my company. I asked my bosses to officially relocate to Madrid on the digital nomad visa. And I just wanted to share some of the visa steps here if anyone is curious. There are certain countries that make it easy for international workers to relocate. For example, in Spain, you just need an income of about 2,700 euros. You need to hold a university degree, so everyone here would be lucky enough to be able to qualify. There's a criminal background check, health insurance. It's actually a really simple process compared to some countries where they have tougher relocation programs because within 21 days, you get the visa and an ID card. Next slide. Living in Madrid, I think also when you just live abroad, you start to go beyond what is comfortable to you. I started getting influenced by my international group of friends, everyone coming from different countries. I became fluent in Spanish, took intensive Spanish courses, 10 hours per week until I got to fluency. Picked up French and Italian because it's quite similar to Spanish, picked up Mandarin online. And I think that broader global experience really encourages you to really connect with other cultures. Next slide. I also was able to pursue a part-time master's degree. I think when you think about time zones, you can really think through maximizing your day because you have different types of work hours if you're working for an international company. So I study in the mornings. Next slide. And then finally, I just wanted to say that Spain was one of the components of me finding my stability and my grounding after years of moving around, of being a digital nomad. I was able to build a community of people that came from different countries that were also Spanish and natives. I was able to build a community from other expats that moved abroad, as well as people from my boyfriend's networks of friends and family. And I was able to really encourage myself to go back to my creative hobbies and live life outside of just the hustle culture that I was familiar with in the US. And I think something interesting to note is there's certain countries like Spain that have expedited citizenship process for certain countries. So I'm Filipino. In 2 years, you can apply to be a citizen in Spain. So rather than waiting the full 10 years, you can have that expedited process. So hopefully going to be a citizen within the next year. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the end.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. And Caitlin, you have really inspired me to ask more strangers to take photos with me. So thank you so much for that. That was amazing. That is amazing. Well, I think we can transition to doing some Q&A if that's okay. And Don, what would you prefer? If someone has a question, would you like them to unmute and ask, put it in the chat?
Yeah, if
Any of
anyone
the
is able
above?
to, if you want to raise your Zoom hand, we can call on you if you're able to speak, and you can just come off mute and ask it. Or if you're not able to speak right now, feel free just to throw it in the chat, and we can all just take a look at it from there, and anybody can feel free to chime in with an answer.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, feel free to raise a hand, throw it in the chat. Maybe I'll just kick off with a quick question because I'm curious, and then we'll see if there's additional questions as well. But I'm kind of curious for the four of you, and if anyone could answer this, like, in what ways was the Harvard community a part of your experience going abroad? In what ways was it really not? I'm curious for you guys. I'll just say from my experience, just when I moved to Vietnam, there's I think 7 people from Harvard College in the country. I think maybe there's 9 now. But that actually small group was really helpful for me in terms of introducing other people. I got my first job through like one older alum who was just very enthusiastic and very kind. But I found that different places it had played a bigger role or a small role. So I'm just kind of curious for you guys if it played what type of role played, if any.
I see.
Um,
Oh,
oh,
go ahead.
go ahead, Caitlin.
I'd say it really played a role when I was especially a digital nomad in different countries. Not specifically Spain, but for example, when I was in Colombia, I didn't know anyone. There were some, Harvard grads that were there, and I was able to grab a quick coffee, get really acquainted with the country, and feel like there was that sense of familiarity. The Harvard network is really wide. So even in Spain, even though it's a smaller network, there's a Harvard Club of Spain. I was able to meet about two Harvard alums much older than my year. However, just having that sense of familiarity, people who knew Madrid in and out because they've been living in Madrid for over 10 years, the other for about 20 years. I think it's amazing to see the global reach of our alumni community, even in countries where there are smaller number of alums as well.
I was gonna say there's definitely not as many alums in South Africa as there are in Spain, but the Harvard community was still important since it was, my friend from Harvard, after all, who extricated me from my breakup to Cape Town. I would say that like beyond just the community itself, I think the Harvard name just itself carries a lot of weight for better or for worse, right? Like perhaps nowadays it's a little worse than we recently graduated, but like when I found my job right in South Africa, I just did so by messaging random people on LinkedIn. And I was like, I got an interview like a week later and flew to Cape Town like pretty much 2 weeks after that, right? So I think that would pretty much only have been possible having like a pretty well known degree or a pretty well known school that you went to. And I mean, I'm an avid fan of just like shamelessly but not harmfully abusing the fact that you are associated with Harvard to get things that you are probably not qualified to get, but could still be interesting to do. And so I feel like particularly when moving abroad, the brand name of the school really does matter when you're trying to do things in different environments.
I love that. Okay, yeah, I see a question in the chat unless Jen or a quick question, actually tactical question, Rayana, about the co-living space.
Oh, right here. Yeah. So there wasn't one specific program with the co-living. Um, Interestingly, so the influence of co-living with people that were not, close friends of mine or family of mine, it was really first influenced by way back when I was 19 years old. I used to live in hostels and meet people really easily while I was traveling. And so I was quite, open with the people I would live with. In terms of co-living, there's this one remote work co-living community called Outsite. They have different locations around the world where it's very similar to an Airbnb, but they have events and community dinners, things like that. And it's more of a community where you know the other people living in the houses. And it encourages you to actually get to know the other people. But interestingly, I was very hyper online on Twitter back in the day, no longer. But I set up my own co-living house. I think people are craving connection and people want to travel with intention. So, it was just a lot of people that were already following me, some friends of the people that were following me as well. And that was the Cartagena co-living house that I did. I it was like not, I was not paid or anything, but it was just like all the events and the programming I planned, the outings and everything, and brought a group of strangers that did not know each other to a place for a month. And we were able to remote work and co-live. I think the reality is you can if you put yourself out there, you can meet people who are also craving to travel, even beyond the Harvard network and within the Harvard network. Like I had a Harvard College friend that joined that co-living house as well. So there's a lot of creative ways. One structured one is Outsite, but you can go on social media and, vet people online as well.
I love that. Yeah, I think there's so much, especially I think the farther you get away from big centers pops, like the more you are proactive, the more people are excited to join in. I just have a great question from Cameron on when moving to a foreign country, how'd you deal with a language and cultural barrier? I'm curious if yeah, anyone and Jen and Mai, you guys are also experience a lot of different language contexts.
Um, yeah, I guess I can chime in here. I did study Chinese in college, so that helped with having conversational Chinese that so it was easier to get around Beijing and the country. So I would say it was yeah, there's definitely still a language barrier though. I think the cultural barrier, I wouldn't say I ever got over the cultural barrier. I think even when I was working in um at different like I was interning at a Chinese tech company, and I think it's just interesting getting to observe that cultural barrier and the different just like how different company what the work environment is like and the work culture there too. So I would even in Singapore where they speak English, Singlish, I would say there's still a cultural barrier. I never really got over that, I would say. I mean, it's just yeah. So I don't know if anyone else had different experiences, but that was mine.
For me, when I first lived in Spain, like I mentioned, I had my beginner Spanish class. I was able to order in coffee shops, but not able to do deep conversations. And I'm quite a social person in English, and I was at that point where I like kind of knew some Spanish, but like didn't understand everything. There was a huge culture shock when I met my boyfriend's like best friends for the first time. It was a house party about like 15 people, everyone speaking Spanish. No one was that great at English. A lot of people were, I mean, mostly speaking Spanish. I had no idea what was going on, and I'm like trying to make a good impression with his friends, and I had no idea what they were saying. Hardly respond to me in English, and I'm like, do they like me? Like, I can't tell. And I think part of it is, that really encouraged me to reach fluency in Spanish. I think being able to integrate with the country's culture, to make friends with the natives, and people often have a different personalities depending on languages and feel comfortable with their native language. So I really pushed myself to reach fluency, but it definitely was a part that was really challenging. And we talk about a lot of the great things about moving abroad, but having that shift of your native language and then suddenly doing your doctor's appointments in a different language or talking to the tax agency about taxes in another language, it's really challenging, but it really pushes you. I think after a few years of living in a country, you'll get there because if you really want to, you can definitely acquire a new language at even when you're an adult.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say one last thing, which is that, like, I totally hear you. And I actually I've never taken a single French course. It was just like listening to podcasts, and then I arrived and I was like, oh my God, like, I can't do this. But I don't know, like, kind of like what Jen also said, I feel like you don't really get over it, but mm, you learn a lot. So if I think just by
Mm.
the fact that you're at Harvard, like if you thrive in like challenges and like just accept that there will be bad days, but there will also be so much that you learn, it's kind of like rather than dealing with it, it's just something that you can learn a lot from.
Totally. Totally. I think there's an interesting, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that like, different countries, I think, have different pieces here, like where in, let's say, what I've discovered is that some countries, you really have to go deep into that language to be effective to operate in. In other countries, that's less expected. Often the smaller the country, the more that you can use English. But it's cool to see how many of you guys are going deep into language. I see one question I really like this question from Anya, which is asking, hey, I'm in Casablanca, probably going to UK next year, but a bunch of family in the US, probably friends as well. How do you think about staying connected to home or whatever that means to you? Curious what you guys
Yeah,
would say
this
that.
is a big one, and I think this is like probably one of the primary challenges. I don't know if Jen, Caitlin, and Maya would agree with me, but I think for me, having my family back in California was probably the most challenging aspect of being abroad. And I think that unfortunately, when you travel abroad and you decide to live someplace that is far from everyone else, I think the onus largely falls on you to initiate and to like make the effort to reach out and to yeah, reconnect with people, because I think people are so out of sight, out of mind in a lot of ways. And if you aren't in their local context, if you aren't like in the States doing something that they're familiar with or that they're like introducing themselves to now and then, like it can be the case that people do fall out of touch. But These things are easy to maintain now more so than ever with technology, right? So I think like just committing, right? I'm particularly bad at this, so I had to just commit like a weekend every month to calling all my friends and having a rotation of people that I could regularly keep in touch with, just to get that sense of yeah, of the home, of the homeland, you know. And I think you also have to assume that like at least one of the trips that you take every year will be that like U.S. circuit or homeland circuit, or whatever you do to visit all your friends and family in one single international trip that I often took. You know, Cape Town being 30 hours away from California was often I was going to do like many stops and try to see everyone all at once. So I think with enough effort, it definitely is possible. But know that it will be like an active thing that you will have to work on. And for people like me that are just terrible at keeping in touch with people, like I had to work especially hard on making
Mhm.
sure that I didn't just like let myself inertially slip into forgetting people.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing. I'm like pretty hardcore on the other side of like really trying to maintain relationships. And one thing I do with my best friend, my college roommate, Greg, is that we actually have it's really cute. We have a we go on a run together 3 times a week over Zoom. And we like it's his 7 a.m., my 7 p.m. And then we just talk and pretty much gossip for an hour 3 times a week. And that's been like an awesome way to stay connected with him. And I do it with a few other people. Not to that maybe intensity 3 times a week, but with him, that's been a really big part of our friendship over the past like 4 or 5 years.
Also, I want to add to that because when you live so far away, when you do come back, like people are more willing to get
Yes,
out to like meet you.
totally.
So whereas like you might be living in New York and you live across town, you might not actually see each other as often. So there's that excuse for making people like come out to meet you.
I'd say
Totally.
I I'm very close to my family, and similar to Andrew, it was one of the hardest things about moving abroad. You know, it's like 11 hours by like up to 15 hours with the connecting to go to LA. And when I used to live in California, periodically I could just easily get a lunch or go to my parents' house to visit, and you can't do that when you're abroad. Um, I am very guilty of calling my parents quite often. Maybe I talk to some friends who are like living close by and they call every now and then. But for me, it's like every single week, maybe like 2 times, 3 times a week. Even if I have nothing crazy going on, it's just that closeness and keeping them up to date, hearing their lives. So I do think you have to kind of adjust so that you can still keep up the communication with your family and your friends as well. And you know, the shift of, for example, in college with your best friends, living with them, going to class with them, and then suddenly my best friend is in Seattle and I'm in Madrid, it's very different in terms of,
Mm.
spending all day together and then now having a different type of relationship. But similar to what everyone here has said, I think it's more of, making the special effort when you do make those trips out to the US to have quality time to I really encourage not just only doing dinners, which are great for catch-ups or like lunches, but doing a shared activity, doing like a new memory together, which I think can really encourage and strengthen the type of relationships that you have, which catch-ups are very important as well, but having those new memories are excellent too.
I see a tactical question about the Harvard Club in your country abroad, and was it helpful in finding community? I think that's a good question. I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious actually. Actually, I have just one small anecdote there as well. When I was in China with Jen, like one thing I found was the Harvard Club was like okay, but it kind of got like captured by people that were great in China, but were not like my peers, or like dude who did masters who was like really deep into like Beijing politic business. I was like, okay, you're awesome, but like you're kind of not like my vibe. It's one thing I did that I thought I found really helpful was starting a WeChat group for Harvard College alums. That was like just really cool, like to see all the Harvard College alums. So I found the Harvard Club not that useful, but I found the Harvard network um, amazing and really generative. I'm curious for others if there's other experiences you guys had.
No, I'm like exactly the same. So the Harvard Club in France, I feel is very similar. Nothing wrong with like different generations, as someone said, and like people with different experiences with Harvard. But I think depending on what you do for work, you might find it more useful for networking, but you might not because it's like a certain kind of person that decides to sign up for the Harvard Club abroad, usually like business people. But I just go to the events because I know there's other recent Harvard alums that also go and we get free drinks. So that's nice. It's an excuse to get together, let's say.
So I didn't, meet close friends from the Harvard Club, but like you mentioned, a lot of the Harvard Club of Spain, at least from the events I've attended, are much older or from different schools rather than the college. However, going to the event, it feels like so safe. I don't know how to explain it. Like so comfortable. Like even though you don't know these people that closely, it's like this shared alumni network where it's very familiar. You have that lived experience that you've all shared, especially considering like how different the environment is living in Madrid or broader Spain compared to Cambridge. You still have that sense of familiarity, which I think is really excellent.
I saw a hand up from my boy Jerry. Jerry, did you want to ask a question? Uh,
Hey,
Good to see you, by the way.
good to see you. So I'm curious because to what extent when you were abroad, you were kind of like in an expat bubble versus kind of like part of the natives, so to speak. Because I feel like it is probably very hard. I mean, both in terms of like the kind of jobs you do, the type of like social circles that you run in.
Uh,
Um, so I'm from Thailand. I am not American. I spent 2 years in Thailand after graduation, but mostly for visa reasons. And I have like a glimpse of the expat bubble in Thailand. I fortunately because I can speak Thai, and I grew up there. Like I'm not that, and even I can tell that the people who are there, a lot of them are who are not Thai would actually never really um, be like part of Thailand in the way that you are say like part of the US if you are here.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, to be honest, like it really varies by country and even by like the relativity. Like, are you coming from the country as like a complete outsider, like looking to learn the language, or do you have some connection to the country because you were born there, you have heritage there? I think all these factors do matter. Um, I mean, from my personal experience, I found that South Africa obviously is a very racially complicated place. Having had an apartheid state. And so like race is a very sensitive thing there, right? And so coming in kind of as an outsider, an Asian American, not even white, not black, kind of defied that and allowed me to integrate a little bit more seamlessly than other like white Americans or black Americans found themselves integrating, which I found really unique and a very South African specific thing, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's got to be like quite case by case. But I do think that one of the things that I found is universal, which is that like if you tell people you are only there to visit, then it is very hard to integrate because people who have spent their lives in a place don't want to spend their time with people who are just passing through, right? Naturally. And so I think if you do really want to get to know the local culture, sometimes you have to commit to being in the local culture and staying there and to living a local life, right? And so I think if that is what you if that's what you want, then and to get that life outside of the expat bubble, then you have to kind of face the cost of that life, which is to not leave, right? Basically.
I think for me, I'm very grateful for my expat community. Of course, there's that shared experience, but having my partner who's Spanish live here really helped me really meet a lot of Spanish natives and see the importance of, like I mentioned, learning the language so you can actually fully connect with the people from the country. Um, of course, I had my expat community where they were speaking English at first, which helped me integrate in the beginning, and then we switched to Spanish once I felt comfortable. Um, it really depends on the country, but for example, in Madrid, there's this community that I'm a part of where they host events like rooftop events and dinners and other types of events where it really encourages like Spanish natives to meet people that are also expats. So there's a lot of mingling and it's a very open community. We have like a WhatsApp group, and it's there's like different tiers of events, like you can go hiking together, things like that, and meet new people. But you really have to like push yourself out of like go outside and force yourself to meet people that might be outside of your comfort zone. Because I remember when I first started getting close friends with Spanish natives, of course, I was like, I am not perfect with my Spanish at first. Like, they're probably judging what I'm saying, or maybe I'm making mistakes, but you eventually get to a point where you realize, like, even if you're not perfect in the language or you get to fluency, you can start really meeting people and understanding their culture once you take the effort to go beyond just the expat bubble and really get to know people from the actual country.
Awesome. We have, let's see, maybe one final question from Isaac, and then this question's around starting a company in another country or working as an expat, working for a local company. Of course, if you guys want to answer any previous questions, feel free to, but maybe save time for one or two more answers before we wrap up.
I can talk a bit about the starting the company one. For me, I guess there's a lot of opportunity in the fact that it was like the only way I could stay in the country, but also in the fact that like, it was the company I ended up starting, it was a payments company, like one of the first tech companies in South Africa. And like I had this opportunity basically to connect this like world of venture capitalists that I knew from San Francisco and Silicon Valley to this like fundamentally underpenetrated market. And so there's like obviously some amount of like value arbitrage that is made there. And that is in essence like the opportunity I ended up capitalizing upon. But there are also a lot of challenges. And I think to the point or the question about being an expat working for a local company, like there are so many differences between American work culture and global work culture. Like, I think only working in another company do you realize how insane American work culture can be at times, which is both a blessing and a curse, of course. But I think like being sensitive to the expectations that other people have to showing up to work and how to expect one to, relate to one another. I think, for example, like Americans are famously very blunt and direct in the workplace. And I found myself having to constantly in South Africa, like tone down the way that I was engaging with people and to try to find ways to not make it personal because we are so, in America, like impersonal with the sort of things that we say to one another in the workplace. So I think just like these types of things, which are not so different from adjusting to any particular thing, but like, in the workplace, I think things like this can often be exacerbated. So, but yeah, very, very interesting experience and definitely worth doing. I think just things that you have to pay attention to if you are, trying to make that your path.
And another thing I wanted to bring up in terms of working abroad is, I'm working for a US company, so I have a US salary, which is very high for the Spanish market. Like when you do move abroad and you do work for a local employer, you should, really think through, there's different costs of living, but with lower cost of living comes lower pay within the Spanish market of local employers. So for example, as everyone knows, engineers get paid a lot of money in the US. And I have a friend who's an engineer here in Spain, has similar experiences getting paid like about 50,000 euros, which is actually high for living in Spain. Cost of living is much lower, rent is lower, food is lower. But if you do choose to get a local employer, you have to really think through that adjusted
Mm.
for salary. And then similarly, if you are able to work for a US employer that gives US salaries and you live in a country with lower cost of living, you do get that benefit as well. So there's definitely different ways to approach it, but you have to think through those adjustments.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, if there's not any other things you guys want to add, cool. Oh, Jen, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, I was just thinking I've worked for a couple of different local employers, like at a startup, for the Singapore government, so pretty dramatically different places. I agree with like Andrew, what you said about like you're just learning a lot about different cultures and more conscious about what American culture is like. I think this is maybe something I'm still trying to figure out is whether those brands, when you work in a company that is a local company overseas and you come back to the US market, which is what I did recently, I'm not sure if those brands are well recognized. I mean, mostly if it's like a local company, right? So that's something to be aware of. I think it depends on how you tell your narrative. And unless that person is kind of global and they know a bit about the market, they might kind of understand what that company means in that context. But in most cases, employers don't. So that's just something to be aware of. Yeah.
Totally. Fabulous. Yes. And plug if you want to move to Vietnam, I'm always hiring a bunch of people. So send me a DM. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Caitlin, Mai, Andrew, Jen, you guys are awesome. And Yeah, it's really cool to see how the Harvard College community is flung like tendrils all over the world.